She was forced to marry her stepsister's cruel mafia fiancé. Then everything changed. Its streets were wide and grand, lined with towering mansions and flickering lanterns, but beneath the beauty lay shadows, whispers of power, secrets, and danger. Among these streets lived Isabella, a young woman whose life was ruled by duty, fear, and the heavy weight of her stepmother's ambition. She stood at the edge of her family's garden, her hands gripping the cold iron railing. The evening breeze teased her dark hair, and her green eyes reflected both longing and despair. She had always been quiet, careful, living in the shadows of her stepsister, Seraphine, whose beauty, charm, and cunning made everyone bow to her will. Isabella had learned early that stepping out of line could mean ruin, not just for herself, but for anyone who dared to cross her stepmother's house. Tonight, the weight on her chest felt heavier than ever. A messenger had arrived that morning with news that would change her life. She was to marry Lucian, the feared heir of the Valorian Mafia. The engagement was a twisted bargain crafted by her stepmother and Seraphine, designed to solidify power and wealth. Isabella's stomach churned at the thought. Lucian's name alone inspired fear. He was ruthless, cold, and known for punishing anyone who dared defy him. Yet there was no room for refusal. The rules of their world were harsh, and family duty outweighed personal desire. Isabella's heart ached not for love but for freedom, freedom she had never truly known. Her thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of her stepmother, Madeline, whose smile was sharp and calculating. "Isabella," she said, her voice smooth yet icy, "your future awaits. Lucian will not tolerate delay." Isabella bowed her head, swallowing her fear. "Yes, stepmother." Madeline's eyes glimmered with satisfaction. "Remember, child, this is not about love. It is about survival, power, and honor. Do not disappoint me or your sister." Isabella nodded, though inside she trembled. She had always known her place, but tonight that place felt like a cage, golden and terrifying. The wedding took place in a grand cathedral perched on the edge of the city. Its tall spires reached toward the night sky, and inside, candlelight flickered against stained glass windows, casting colors like fire across the marble floor. Nobles, mafia allies, and influential families filled the hall, their eyes heavy with expectation. Isabella walked slowly down the aisle, her gown shimmering in the candlelight, her hands trembling beneath her veil. And there he was, Lucian. He stood at the altar, tall and commanding, dressed in a dark suit that mirrored the shadows around him. His eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the room, then rested on Isabella with an intensity that made her stomach twist. He did not smile. He did not speak. He merely observed like a storm held in human form. Isabella's fear surged. She had heard stories of his cruelty, how he ruled his world with a firm hand, how betrayal meant ruin, and how he tolerated nothing less than absolute loyalty. And yet, there was something in his eyes that unsettled her in a different way, something she could not name. It was as if behind the steel and darkness there was a flicker of something else. The ceremony was formal, silent, and tense. Words were exchanged, rings placed, vows spoken with the weight of obligation rather than love. When it was over, Isabella felt as if the walls of the cathedral were closing in, trapping her in a life she had not chosen. Lucian extended his hand. She took it reluctantly, feeling the strength and control in his grip, yet also a strange, unspoken gravity that drew her in. The reception was held in Lucian's mansion, a fortress of stone and shadows, its walls adorned with art, weapons, and relics of power. The air was heavy with music, laughter, and whispers of alliances being formed and broken. Isabella wandered the grand hall, feeling like a ghost among the living, while Lucian remained at her side, silent and watchful. It was during a quiet moment that she dared to speak. "Why me?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. Lucian's gaze met hers, piercing and unyielding. "Because duty is not fair," he said simply, his tone flat yet not unkind. And because some choices are made for survival, not for happiness. Isabella's chest tightened. His words were cold, but there was an honesty in them that startled her. For the first time, she saw not a tyrant, but a man burdened by rules, duty, and a world that demanded ruthlessness. She wanted to hate him, but something inside her resisted. That night, as the mansion settled into silence, Isabella was escorted to her chambers. The walls were lavish, adorned with tapestries and gold, yet to her they felt like prison bars. She sat by the window, staring at the city below, shadows stretching like dark rivers across the streets. A knock came at the door. She turned to see Lucian standing there, his expression unreadable. "You should rest," he said. His voice, low and steady, carried authority, yet there was a hesitation she had not expected. "I cannot sleep," Isabella admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. He stepped closer, studying her. "Fear is natural, but do not mistake it for weakness. You are stronger than you believe." Isabella blinked, startled. No one had ever said such words to her before. Not her stepmother, not her sister, and certainly not Lucian. Her heart raced with confusion and a flicker of hope she did not understand. Before she could reply, his attention shifted, his eyes narrowing as if he had heard something only he could perceive. Isabella followed his gaze and saw shadows moving in the hall outside. He was already gone, swift and silent, leaving her alone with her thoughts. Days passed in the mansion, each one blending into the next. Isabella learned the rhythm of her new life: formal dinners, careful conversations, and the constant, quiet presence of Lucian. He remained distant, but occasionally she caught glimpses of something softer, an almost imperceptible concern when she was uneasy, a fleeting smile when she demonstrated courage. Despite herself, Isabella began to feel a connection growing, fragile but undeniable. She did not trust it, nor did she fully understand it, but it stirred something within her heart that she had long buried beneath fear. One evening, she wandered the gardens, the moon casting silver light over the flowers and fountains. She heard whispers carried on the wind, Lucian speaking in the hallways, low and urgent, to someone she could not see. She strained to listen. "If she learns the truth too soon, it will destroy everything," Lucian said, his voice tight with tension. Isabella's heart pounded. Truth? What truth could possibly concern her? Her mind raced with fear, curiosity, and the faint stirrings of hope. Whatever it was dangerous. And whatever it was somehow connected to her. She sank to a bench, gripping her hands in her lap. The city outside gleamed, but it felt far away, like a world she could never touch. And yet a spark had been lit, a spark that whispered of secrets, of danger, of connection, and of a future she could not yet see. As the night deepened, Isabella realized that her life had changed irrevocably. She was no longer the shadowed girl in her stepsister's world. She was now bound to a man of power, mystery, and danger. She did not know if she would survive the coming days, or if her heart would be her ally or her enemy. And somewhere deep in the mansion, Lucian's eyes watched her from the shadows, unreadable, guarded, yet undeniably drawn to the spark of strength he saw flicker within her. Cliffhanger. Isabella had only just stepped into this world of shadows and secrets. She did not yet know that tonight a decision would be made that could bind her and Lucian in ways neither of them could escape. A secret, dangerous and buried in darkness, waited to reveal itself, and once it did, everything would change. The mansion of Lucian rose like a fortress under the pale moonlight, its stone walls both grand and intimidating. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of polished wood, old leather, and a faint trace of fire from the hearths. Isabella had begun to understand the rhythm of this place, how servants moved silently, how the guards' eyes never left the halls, and how Lucian ruled with quiet authority that brooked no challenge. She walked through the corridors that night, her hands lightly brushing the intricate carvings on the walls. The grandeur was suffocating, but there was a strange beauty in it, a mix of power and history. Each room seemed to carry its own secrets, whispered tales of battles won and lost, deals forged in shadow, and loyalty tested under fire. Lucian appeared suddenly, stepping from the darkness with a calm, silent precision. His presence always drew her attention, even when she tried to avoid it. "You should rest," he said, his voice low, almost commanding, yet there was a subtle softness beneath the surface. "I cannot," Isabella replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "There is too much to think about." He studied her for a moment, his eyes narrowing. "And what is it that troubles you?" "I do not understand you," she admitted. "You are cruel and demanding, yet sometimes I feel there is more beneath it." Lucian's jaw tightened and he took a slow step closer. "You are perceptive. Few notice the rules behind the face." "Rules?" Isabella asked. "Life in this city," he said. "In my family, it is governed by codes, loyalty, honor, survival. And sometimes cruelty is necessary." His gaze softened slightly, almost imperceptibly. "I am not without heart, Isabella, but it is hidden carefully." Isabella felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, a strange mixture of curiosity and understanding. For the first time, she saw him not as a tyrant, but as a man shaped by a harsh world, trapped in his own code. Over the next days, Isabella began to notice the subtle details of her new life. She saw how Lucian interacted with his associates, firm but fair when necessary, ruthless to those who broke trust, yet always careful to protect what was his. She also began to see glimpses of the man behind the mask. The way he paused in the garden to watch the stars, the rare smile when a servant quietly succeeded, the faint tension in his shoulders that betrayed burdens she could not yet name. Lucian, in turn, began to watch Isabella more closely. Her fear was natural, but there was courage in the way she held herself, a quiet strength that fascinated him. She was not like the others, delicate, submissive, or easily broken. She had endured much, and it had forged something strong beneath her gentle exterior. One evening, he summoned her to the library, a vast room filled with ancient books, scrolls, and maps of lands far beyond the city. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across the walls. "There are things you must understand," Lucian began, his voice careful. "This life is not just about comfort or wealth. There are dangers, alliances, enemies, and betrayals that come without warning." Isabella listened intently, her heart pounding. She realized that the world she had been forced into was far more dangerous than she had imagined. "You must learn to navigate it," he continued. "To survive here, you must observe, understand, and sometimes act without fear." "Act?" she asked, surprised. "Even someone like you," he said, his gaze intense, "has a part to play. You are not powerless. Do not let fear blind you to what you can do." Isabella felt a mix of fear and determination. She was learning slowly that survival in Lucian's world meant more than obedience. It meant courage, strategy, and insight. And with every lesson she felt herself changing. But danger was never far. Seraphine, her stepsister, moved in shadows, her jealousy sharp as a knife. She could not bear the thought of Lucian showing even a hint of respect or concern for Isabella. Seraphine began to weave subtle traps, alliances with rivals, and whispered rumors to undermine Isabella at every turn. One evening, as Isabella walked through the gardens, she noticed Seraphine's presence across the fountain. Her stepsister's smile was sharp, false, and full of malice. Isabella's heart tightened, but she forced calm. She had learned that fear alone would not protect her here. She needed patience, observation, and a careful mind. "You are learning," Lucian said quietly from behind her, his voice making her jump slightly. "Do not underestimate your sister. She is clever and she is dangerous." "I know," Isabella replied, "but I will not be a pawn." Lucian regarded her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, he allowed a faint nod of approval. It was subtle, almost invisible, but Isabella felt it like sunlight breaking through clouds. Days later, Isabella found herself in the midst of a sudden crisis. A rival family, intent on undermining Lucian's control, made a move against the mansion. Guards shouted, alarms rang, and shadows moved swiftly through the halls. Panic might have overwhelmed her in the past, but now Isabella remained steady. She remembered Lucian's lessons: observation, courage, and careful action. She followed him through the chaos, staying close as he moved with practiced precision. Lucian's presence was commanding, his every action calculated to protect, to lead, to survive. And yet, Isabella noticed something new. He hesitated for her, risked exposure to shield her from danger. For the first time, she felt that he cared, not just out of duty but with something deeper, more personal. When the danger passed and the intruders were driven off, Lucian's gaze found hers. There was no anger, no judgment, only recognition. "You did well," he said quietly. "Do you understand now? Survival is not just about following orders. It is about understanding the world and your place in it." Isabella nodded, her heart pounding. She understood, and she also realized that her feelings were shifting. Fear was mingling with respect, admiration, and something she dared not name. Late that night, Isabella stood in her chambers, staring at the moonlit gardens. Her mind replayed the events of the day, the danger, Lucian's actions, and the subtle shift she had felt in their connection. The city outside was quiet, but her heart was restless. A knock at the door made her startle. Lucian entered, his presence commanding yet calm. "You are awake," he said, almost as an observation rather than a question. "Yes," Isabella replied, her voice steady. I cannot sleep." He stepped closer, his eyes studying her. "Do you understand why I act the way I do?" "Yes," she said, "I think I am beginning to understand. It is not cruelty for its own sake. It is survival, rules, and protecting what matters." Lucian's eyes softened slightly, and for a brief moment, Isabella saw the man behind the mask, a man who bore burdens she could not imagine. "Good," he said, his voice low. "You must learn quickly. The world outside this mansion does not forgive mistakes, and sometimes loyalty and trust must be earned even between us." Isabella's chest tightened. She understood the weight of his words. Trust here was rare, and loyalty could mean life or death. Yet despite the danger, she felt something stirring, an unspoken connection, fragile yet undeniable. Before leaving, Lucian added, "There are truths you do not yet know. Secrets that, if revealed too soon, could destroy everything. Be careful whom you trust." Isabella nodded, understanding that her life had changed in ways she could not yet predict. She felt both fear and curiosity. What secrets did he hide? And more importantly, could she face them alongside him? As she lay down, sleep finally claiming her, Isabella felt a strange mixture of dread and anticipation. The world she had been thrust into was dark and dangerous, but for the first time, she sensed that she was not entirely powerless. A spark had been lit, one that promised danger, growth, and perhaps an unexpected bond with the man she had once feared. Cliffhanger. Somewhere in the mansion's shadows, Lucian watched her, thinking of the hidden truths that could bind them or break them. And beyond the walls, Seraphine was plotting, her jealousy sharper than ever. The danger was far from over, and the secrets waiting to emerge would test their courage, loyalty, and the fragile connection that was beginning to grow between Isabella and Lucian. The mansion, which had once felt like a fortress, now seemed fragile under the weight of threats that pressed closer every day. Isabella had learned much since her forced marriage, but the lessons were far from over. Danger now approached not only from outside but from within the shadows of her own family. Seraphine's jealousy and ambition had grown sharper, like a blade hidden behind a smile. It began with whispers, rumors of betrayal, of alliances forming against Lucian, and of plans that could destroy him and everyone under his protection. Isabella had heard enough to know that Seraphine would stop at nothing to assert control. Her stepsister was clever and cruel, a combination that made her far more dangerous than any external enemy. One evening, as Isabella walked along the quiet corridors of the mansion, she noticed subtle signs of movement, doors slightly ajar, shadows flitting across walls, the faint scent of someone who did not belong. Her heart tightened, but she did not panic. She had learned to observe, to listen, and to act. The world she was now a part of demanded vigilance, and she was learning to survive in it. Lucian appeared beside her, silent and commanding. His presence alone seemed to steady her nerves. "There is danger," he said simply, his voice low and controlled. "Seraphine has allies, she will test you, and she will test me." "I am ready," Isabella said, though her heart still raced. She was ready, not just to survive, but to fight for her place, for her dignity, and for the fragile trust she had begun to feel for Lucian. Lucian studied her for a long moment, his sharp gaze softening just enough to reveal the faintest flicker of approval. "Good. Courage is not enough. You must also be wise, observe, understand, and act with precision." The following days brought a series of subtle threats. Letters arrived with veiled warnings. Servants whispered about strangers near the gates. Isabella found herself in small moments of danger that tested her resolve. Each encounter forced her to rely on what she had learned: patience, observation, and quick thinking. Through it all, Lucian remained close, always silent but watchful. There were moments when Isabella saw his restraint, his careful control of both emotion and action. She began to see that his apparent cruelty was part of a calculated world of rules, a shield to protect not only himself, but those he cared about. One night during a quiet walk in the mansion's gardens, Isabella spoke her thoughts aloud. "I think I understand you now," she said softly. "You are not what the world says you are. You are more than the cruelty people speak of." Lucian's eyes, dark and unreadable, met hers. For a moment the intensity of his gaze was almost overwhelming. Then, unexpectedly, he allowed a rare softness to show. "You see clearly," he said. "Few do, but understanding does not always mean trust, and even those we trust may disappoint." "I will not disappoint you," Isabella said firmly, though she felt her voice tremble slightly. "I will learn, I will endure, I will fight when I must." Lucian's gaze softened further, and for the first time Isabella felt that she was not merely a pawn in a cruel game. She was becoming a partner, someone whose courage and insight mattered. But the peace was short-lived. Seraphine's plotting had taken a dangerous turn. She allied with a rival faction outside the mansion, a group that sought to weaken Lucian's influence and destroy those who opposed her. One evening, Isabella discovered the truth by accident. Hidden behind the velvet drapes of the library, she overheard a conversation between Seraphine and her accomplices. "Isabella must be removed," Seraphine said, her voice sharp with malice. "Once she is gone, Lucian will have no reason to hesitate. Then we take what is ours." Isabella's heart sank. Her stepsister's ambition knew no limits. And now the danger was personal. She realized that survival meant action. She could no longer rely solely on observation or courage. She had to act strategically, and for the first time she understood the weight of the world she had been thrust into. The confrontation came sooner than she expected. One evening, a group of masked men infiltrated the mansion's grounds, moving swiftly toward the inner courtyard. The guards sounded the alarm and chaos erupted. Isabella's pulse raced, but she remembered Lucian's lessons. She did not flee. She moved with intention, seeking the safest paths and observing the intruders' patterns. Lucian appeared at her side, his presence commanding and resolute. He moved with precision, deflecting threats and guiding Isabella through the danger. And then it happened. One of the intruders aimed directly for her. In that moment, Lucian acted without hesitation. He blocked the attack, putting himself in harm's way to protect her. Isabella's chest tightened. For the first time, she saw him not as a distant, untouchable figure of power, but as a man willing to risk everything for her safety. Something in her heart shifted, a fragile trust, a growing admiration and a connection that frightened and exhilarated her at once. After the danger passed, Lucian stood before her, his expression unreadable. "You must understand," he said quietly, "that the world we live in will always test us, and sometimes the greatest tests come from those we least expect." Isabella nodded, her mind racing. She understood now that Seraphine's betrayal was only the beginning. Danger would continue, and the world would demand both courage and wisdom. In the quiet that followed, Isabella and Lucian found themselves alone in the mansion's library. The firelight flickered, casting long shadows across the room. Isabella dared to speak, her voice soft but determined. "Why protect me?" she asked. "Why risk yourself?" Lucian paused, his gaze fixed on the flames. "Because you are not just anyone," he said finally, "and because I cannot ignore what matters, even if it complicates everything." Isabella's heart raced. His words were carefully measured, yet they carried an honesty she had never heard before. She realized that their bond was changing, from fear and obligation to something more profound, something that carried both responsibility and hope. For the first time, she allowed herself to consider the possibility that a connection could grow between them, even in a world ruled by shadows and danger. The next challenge came swiftly. Seraphine, enraged by the failed attack, devised a more personal scheme. She kidnapped one of the mansion's key servants to lure Isabella into a trap. The message was clear. Isabella could not act alone, and any misstep would have severe consequences. Isabella felt a surge of fear, but also determination. She refused to be manipulated any longer. She informed Lucian immediately, and together, they devised a plan to rescue the servant and confront the threat directly. The night was tense. Shadows moved along the mansion's walls, the moon casting pale light across the garden paths. Isabella moved with confidence, following Lucian's lead. She noticed how he trusted her instincts, how he allowed her to act, and how he valued her courage. When they reached the location, they found Seraphine waiting, her smile sharp and victorious. "Did you really think you could outsmart me?" she asked, her eyes glittering with malice. Isabella stepped forward, her voice steady. "I am not the same girl you once knew, and Lucian is not the man you can manipulate. We will not fail." Lucian's presence behind her was steadying, his gaze fierce and unwavering. Together, they faced Seraphine and her allies, not with reckless anger but with strategy, courage, and unity. In the end, Seraphine's plan collapsed. Isabella's quick thinking, combined with Lucian's strength and precision, ensured victory. But the encounter left a mark, a reminder that danger, betrayal, and power struggles would never end in this world. After the confrontation, Isabella and Lucian returned to the mansion. The air was heavy, but there was a sense of relief. They had faced danger together and emerged stronger. In the quiet of the night, they shared a moment alone, sitting in the moonlit garden. "You have grown," Lucian said softly, his gaze fixed on her. "Stronger, wiser, braver." Isabella felt a warmth she had never known. "I had to," she replied. "For survival, for you, for myself." Lucian's eyes softened, and for the first time, Isabella saw a hint of vulnerability in him. "You have changed the way I see the world," he admitted quietly. "And perhaps the way I see myself." Isabella's heart tightened. Their bond, forged in danger and tested by betrayal, had grown into something neither of them fully understood yet. It was fragile, uncertain, and filled with both hope and fear. Cliffhanger, just as the night seemed calm, a distant horn echoed across the city. A new threat was approaching, one more powerful and dangerous than anything they had faced. Isabella realized that their journey was far from over. And deep in her heart, she understood that to survive, and to protect the fragile bond growing between them, they would have to face not only external enemies but the shadows within themselves. The city of Valoria lay quiet beneath the pale light of dawn, but the peace was fragile. Isabella and Lucian had survived the recent threats, but the shadows of danger never truly vanished. Seraphine, humiliated by her failed schemes, had not disappeared. She lingered in the periphery, her jealousy sharp as ever, planning her next move. Isabella stood on the balcony of the mansion, the morning breeze brushing her face. She could see the city stretching beyond the walls, streets gleaming like silver under the early light. Her heart was heavy, yet resolute. She had changed. Fear no longer ruled her. Courage, wisdom, and a cautious hope had taken root. Lucian appeared behind her, silent as always. His presence was commanding yet comforting. "You are awake early," he said, his voice low. "I wanted to think," Isabella replied. "About everything about us, about what has happened and what is to come." Lucian's gaze softened as he looked at her. "You have grown stronger than you know. And in this world, strength is not measured by fear or force alone, but by heart and mind together." Isabella felt warmth spread through her chest. His words, carefully chosen and quietly delivered, carried a weight she had never experienced before. They were not words of obligation or power. They were words of recognition, respect, and something deeper. That evening, a message arrived that shattered the fragile calm. Seraphine had gathered her remaining allies and was marching toward the mansion with a clear intent: to confront and destroy both Isabella and Lucian. The news struck like thunder, yet Isabella's fear was tempered by resolve. She no longer felt powerless. She had learned, observed, and endured, and now it was time to act. Lucian moved swiftly to prepare. Guards were stationed, strategies were discussed, and every room and corridor of the mansion was fortified. Isabella watched him, understanding for the first time the weight he carried, the constant vigilance, the burden of protecting what he loved, and the calculated control required to survive in this world. "Stay close," Lucian said quietly. "Tonight, everything could change." "But we face it together." Isabella nodded. There was no fear now, only determination. Together they would confront the threat that had haunted their lives. As night fell, Seraphine's forces arrived, shadows moving swiftly through the mansion's outer grounds. The battle was tense, strategic, and precise. Isabella and Lucian moved in perfect coordination, their partnership seamless. She deflected danger, guided by instinct and observation, while he countered threats with a commanding presence that left their enemies struggling to keep pace. In the midst of the chaos, Seraphine revealed herself, her expression a mixture of fury and disbelief. "You think you can stop me?" she demanded, her voice trembling with anger. Isabella stepped forward, her chest lifted with courage. "No longer," she said firmly. "We will not be manipulated. We will not be afraid." Lucian stood beside her, unwavering. "You underestimated us," he said simply. "And now the choice is yours, surrender or leave." Seraphine's hands trembled, her control slipping. For the first time, Isabella saw fear in her stepsister's eyes. It was a fleeting moment, but it revealed that Seraphine's power, like all shadows, was fragile when confronted by light and resolve. The confrontation escalated quickly. Seraphine attempted to strike, but Isabella acted with precision, using what she had learned in these past weeks. She blocked, diverted, and outmaneuvered her stepsister, demonstrating courage and intelligence that left even Lucian momentarily impressed. "Enough!" Lucian's voice rang out, calm but full of authority. "This ends now." Seraphine faltered, realizing that her schemes had failed. The allies she had relied on were scattered or subdued. Her power crumbled before the combined strength, courage, and strategy of Isabella and Lucian. Finally, she fled into the shadows, her malice unresolved but neutralized for now. Isabella's chest heaved with relief, her heart racing not from fear but from triumph. She had faced her greatest challenge and survived, alongside the man who had become her partner in both life and battle. In the quiet aftermath, Isabella and Lucian found themselves alone in the mansion's gardens. The moon cast silver light over the fountains and flowers, the world serene after the storm. They walked together, the air between them filled with a silent understanding that needed no words. "You were incredible tonight," Lucian said softly, breaking the silence. "You were brave, clever, and fearless. I am impressed." Isabella's cheeks flushed. "I only did what I had to," she said. "But thank you for trusting me and for standing by me." Lucian's gaze softened, and for the first time his full attention was on her. "It is not just trust," he said. "It is respect, and something more, something I have not allowed myself to feel for a long time." Isabella's heart fluttered. She had felt it too, the growing bond, the connection forged through danger, fear, and shared experience. It was no longer fear that bound them together. It was trust, understanding, and an unspoken affection that neither could deny. They walked to the fountain at the center of the garden, the water reflecting the moonlight. Lucian took her hand gently, a touch that was both protective and intimate. Isabella felt a warmth spread through her, a sense of belonging she had never known. "We have both changed," he said quietly. "I am no longer the man I was when you first came into my life. And you are no longer the frightened girl I thought I knew." Isabella looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "We have survived together," she said, "and we will face whatever comes next together. Whatever it is, we are stronger than fear." Lucian's lips curved into a faint, rare smile. "Yes," he said, "together." Days passed, and peace began to settle over the mansion. Isabella and Lucian continued to learn from each other, sharing quiet moments in the gardens, studying strategies for protection, and even laughing softly at rare moments of calm. The bond between them grew, no longer forged by fear or duty alone, but by shared courage, respect, and an emerging trust that neither had expected. Seraphine had retreated, but Isabella knew she would always be a threat. The world of power and danger did not forgive weakness, and vigilance was necessary. Yet now, Isabella faced that world with strength and confidence. She was no longer the frightened girl forced into a marriage. She was a partner, capable, brave, and resolute. Lucian, too, had changed. He had learned to trust, to protect not out of duty alone, but out of genuine care. The man who had once seemed unyielding and cold now allowed himself to be vulnerable, to feel, and to connect with Isabella in ways he had never imagined possible. One evening, standing together on the balcony, Isabella looked out over the city. The streets glimmered under the moonlight, serene yet filled with unseen dangers. Lucian stood behind her, his presence steady and reassuring. "Do you think we are truly safe?" Isabella asked softly. Lucian's gaze swept over the city, then returned to her. "Safe is a relative term," he said, "but we are stronger together, and whatever comes, we face it as one." Isabella smiled, her heart light but full. For the first time, she felt a sense of belonging, of partnership, and even love. The fear that had once ruled her life was gone, replaced by courage, trust, and a connection that had grown through darkness and danger. "You are right," she said. "Together." Lucian took her hand in his, holding it firmly but gently. "Together," he repeated, his voice carrying a weight of promise, protection, and care. The night stretched around them, the city alive with quiet energy, yet for the first time Isabella and Lucian felt calm. They had faced betrayal, danger, and fear, and they had survived. Their bond was forged in shadows and tested by trials, but it was unbreakable. Cliffhanger resolution. The city of Valoria would always hold dangers, and Seraphine's shadow would never vanish completely. But Isabella and Lucian had discovered something stronger than fear, betrayal, or ambition. A partnership built on trust, courage, and the quiet, unwavering strength of two hearts bound together. They stood side by side, ready for whatever the future might bring, their love forged in darkness, now shining with quiet, enduring light.